For 79 years, the doors to a forgotten Nazi weapons lab stayed sealed in silence. When they were finally forced open, the dust of decades gave way to something far more chilling than rusted machines and faded blueprints. Inside lay not just evidence of secret weapons, but fragments of rituals, symbols, and manuscripts. What began as a hunt for hidden technology quickly turned into a descent into something darker, a place where science and sorcery blurred and the line between weapon and nightmare vanished. The door that wouldn't open. Deep in a forested stretch of southern Germany, where the trees grow thick and the ground is scarred by forgotten war bunkers, a discovery shook historians in 2024. Beneath layers of moss and soil, a massive steel door had been spotted on old aerial maps, hidden for nearly 8 decades. It was no ordinary structure. The door was set into a hillside, framed by reinforced concrete and armored with steel plates. For years, locals had whispered about this place. They told stories of soldiers vanishing in the woods, of muffled sounds from beneath the ground, and of strange lights seen on stormy nights. Parents warned children never to wander too far, saying the forest was haunted by the dead of the war. These tales might have been dismissed as folklore, but the wartime record told a different story. The Nazis were known to build vast underground facilities, hidden from Allied bombers and sealed to prevent intruders. One example was the Redl-Zipf complex in Austria, where the SS oversaw forced laborers constructing tunnels to test engines for the V-2 rocket program under Hans Kammler's command. Similar facilities dotted the former Reich, most destroyed or abandoned after 1945. Yet some were deliberately erased from maps and sealed so tightly that not even locals knew what was inside. The forest bunker near Bavaria was one of those sealed mysteries. Several attempts to enter it had been made in the decades after the war. In the 1950s and 60s, amateur explorers tried dynamite and heavy drills, but the steel held firm. In the 1980s, historians who tracked rumors of Nazi wonder weapons located the site, but collapsed tunnels in unstable ground forced them to retreat. Wartime Allied intelligence reports hinted at such facilities being fortified with booby traps and steel barriers, designed to keep their contents from ever falling into enemy hands. The door itself looked like a relic from another world. Thick riveted plates bore streaks of rust, but the structure remained solid. Faded German words, barely legible, warned trespassers to keep out. Old cables still snaking from the ground seemed to pulse faintly when touched, as if carrying a ghost of electricity after all these years. Every sign suggested that this was not simply a storage bunker. It had been meant to guard something. The real breakthrough came in 2024. A team of archaeologists working with engineers deployed modern tools that the post-war world had never possessed. Ground-penetrating radar mapped out chambers beneath the hillside. LIDAR scanners traced hidden corridors. Robotic crawlers fitted with cameras navigated into cracks too narrow for humans. Slowly, the sealed entrance yielded. Sparks flew as a plasma torch cut through the final bolts. When the heavy steel finally shifted, a chill gust rolled out of the darkness, thick with dust and the smell of rusted metal. The flashlights revealed only blackness at first. But then, as the beams swept across the interior, the explorers caught sight of a glimmering shape. It was metallic, curved, and unlike any known design from the 1940s. As they stepped inside, the dim light caught something hidden in the shadows, something no historian had ever seen, and nothing like any weapon of its time. A lab frozen in time. When the heavy door finally gave way, the explorers stepped into a silence so deep it seemed alive. The first hall stretched ahead like a tomb. Broken glass glittered faintly on the ground, as though the room had been shattered in panic long ago. Wooden chairs lay overturned, their legs splintered, their fabric rotting into threads. Every surface was coated with a dense layer of gray powder. Time had not touched this place gently, it had entombed it. The team advanced cautiously, boots crunching over fragments of glass and rusted metal. Along the walls stood long workbenches. Some still held chemical vials, corks shriveled but intact, the liquid inside darkened to syrup. Papers were scattered across tables and the floor, brittle with age. bound stacks of documents were piled in corners, stamped in bold black ink with phrases like SS, Geheime Reichssache, Top Secret, and Nicht öffnen, do not open. Many pages bore smudges of coded numbers and hand-drawn diagrams. On the peeling plaster walls, the explorers found strange markings. Faded chalk formulas ran in looping lines, interrupted by sketches of spirals and circles. Among the equations were symbols that didn't look scientific at all, jagged runes and occult shapes that echoed motifs once favored by the SS and the Ahnenerbe, Himmler's shadowy research division. Some looked like blueprints of machines. Others resembled ritual seals. It was impossible to tell where science ended and obsession began. The eerie stillness was broken only by the occasional crackle of static from the explorers' equipment. One technician brushed against a wire snaking down from the ceiling and swore as a faint shock tingled through his glove. Somehow, after all these decades, traces of electricity still haunted the circuitry. The silence seemed to deepen after that, as if the walls themselves were listening. What unsettled the team even more was how complete everything appeared. In known Nazi research centers like Peenemünde, where the IV-2 rockets were tested, most materials had been stripped out or destroyed in bombing raids. At Mittelwerk, the underground factory where V-weapons were assembled, Allied forces had hauled away machinery after the war. But here, nothing had been touched. It was as though the scientists had simply stood up one day, walked out, and sealed the door behind them. In the far corner, a discovery froze the group. Several crates stacked neatly still bore the wax seals of the Third Reich. The stamps were unbroken, the wax cracked but untouched. Red markings warned "vermisst," missing, or sometimes simply bore a black swastika. These crates were time capsules, untouched since the war. Blueprints discovered in a scattered pile revealed designs that didn't resemble any known weapon. Bell-shaped forms and spiral coils, marked with cryptic measurements, suggested machines no one had ever built or admitted to building. Strangest of all, one set of schematics included maps of the facility itself, showing chambers that did not match the halls they had already explored. Somewhere in the dark, hidden rooms still waited. The air felt heavier as they pressed deeper, following the lines of the drawings. And then, in the beam of a flashlight, a new outline appeared. A wall with seams too regular to be natural, bolted and carved with markings. It wasn't on the surface map. It had been sealed deliberately. Behind that wall, hidden for almost 80 years, lay a hatch bolted tight and engraved with symbols, clearly meant never to be opened. The machines of impossible power. Walking deeper into the lab, investigators discover a chamber cluttered with half-built machines, massive copper coils wound into spiral frames, turbine-like engines that seem decades ahead of their time, and vacuum chambers scarred with signs of testing. Some devices resemble experimental rocket components. Others appear so alien in design that even modern engineers are unsettled. The room had the eerie stillness of a factory built to manufacture something that should never exist. On the workbenches, alongside broken tools and torn notes, lay schematic drawings stamped with the Nazi eagle and swastika. These diagrams bore resemblance to weapons that historians know were real. The terrifying Wunderwaffe, or wonder weapons, that Nazi Germany poured resources into during the final desperate years of the war. The V-1 flying bomb, the V-2 rocket, and the Me-262 jet fighter were no myths. They existed and changed warfare forever, though not in time to alter the war's outcome. According to military historians, the Nazis hoped such weapons would give them the advantage to reverse their collapsing fortunes. But the documents here hinted at projects that went far beyond rockets and jets. On yellowed paper, drawn with obsessive precision, was a design for a bell-shaped device mounted on a base, wires spiraling into a hollow chamber. The notes reference something called Serum 525, described as a violet metallic liquid that was supposedly required for its operation. This was no ordinary engineering sketch. It was the exact shape linked in post-war rumors to Die Glock, the so-called Nazi bell, a machine many conspiracy theorists believe was intended to harness exotic energies, bend gravity, or even distort time itself. While most historians dismiss these stories as legends born from fear and imagination, the material evidence scattered across this chamber was difficult to ignore. Some of the alloys used in the half-built devices were surprisingly advanced for the 1940s. Metallurgists examining samples later suggested they resembled early experiments in superconductivity, technology that should not have existed in wartime Germany. High-voltage capacitors and strange crystalline components were scattered across crates, as though a test had been prepared but abandoned at the last moment. In a small adjoining room, the team found bound logs written in hurried coded German. Translations revealed chilling lines about tests attempted but aborted due to dangerous instability. Several entries ended with warnings of unknown hazards. The handwriting grew increasingly frantic toward the final pages, suggesting the scientists themselves were losing control over what they had built. Then came the most unsettling discovery. As one investigator brushed against a coil, a low vibration shuddered through the machine. It was faint, but unmistakable. After nearly 8 decades in darkness, some of the equipment still carried power. It led them toward a sealed room where the most disturbing secrets waited. The human experiments. The explorers thought they had already seen the worst the underground facility could offer, but when a rusted steel door creaked open, the air changed. The smell was stale and chemical, a mix of rot and formaldehyde that had lingered for decades. Inside, the room resembled a forgotten operating theater. Metal examination tables stood under broken lamps, their surfaces scarred with deep scratches. Along the walls were shelves lined with sealed glass jars. Within the cloudy liquid floated fragments of tissue, preserved organs, and even what looked like parts of human spines. On one bench lay surgical instruments, scalpels, clamps, needles corroded with rust, yet still sharp enough to cut. Some were arranged neatly as if waiting for the next subject. Beside them sat notebooks written in cramped, hurried German. As the pages were turned, the horror became undeniable. Each entry cataloged experiments with precision, doses of unknown serums, exposure times to chemicals, detailed notes on how long a subject survived before collapse. The handwriting was clinical, detached, as if describing tests on objects rather than people. What was found here mirrored the darkest chapters of Nazi history. During the Third Reich, hundreds of physicians, many under SS supervision, carried out medical experiments on concentration camp prisoners. Some sought to test endurance, others to prove twisted racial theories. Infamous names such as Josef Mengele are remembered for his cruelty at Auschwitz, but the truth was far wider. Secret programs across camps and hidden labs turned human beings into unwilling test subjects. The journals in this room contain chilling references to trials with radiation and chemical agents. One page described prolonged exposure to Serum X with notes on muscle failure. Another recorded reaction under freezing, recalling the hypothermia trials of Dr. Sigmund Rascher at Dachau, where prisoners were submerged in icy water until death, all in the name of military science. Other entries hinted at sterilization experiments similar to those of Dr. Karl Klauberg, who injected caustic chemicals into women to destroy their reproductive systems. The silence of the room became unbearable. Each object seemed to whisper of suffering, of screams that had echoed in these walls long ago. One explorer's hand shook as they realized the implications. These were not cadavers dissected after death. The precise timings and notes on survivability proved that living people were strapped to those tables and experimented upon, their agony recorded like data in a lab. Then came a final discovery that chilled the team even further. At the back of the chamber lay a leather-bound notebook marked with the SS insignia. Its last entry was brief and cryptic. The vault remains sealed. Even we cannot control what was placed inside. Guards instructed never to enter. The Black Vault. The vault door gave way with a shuddering groan, as if the steel itself resisted being opened after so many years. A heavy draft of stale, metallic air poured out, cold and suffocating, carrying with it the faint scent of chemicals that had lingered in silence for decades. The team hesitated before stepping inside, their flashlights piercing the thick darkness that clung to the chamber. The room was vast, lined with thick concrete walls reinforced by steel beams. Immediately visible were rows of enormous canisters, arranged like soldiers waiting in formation. Each was painted with faded hazard symbols. the unmistakable black trefoil of radiation warnings, and the word radioactive scrawled in bold German letters. Above some, the SS insignia still marked ownership, a chilling reminder of who had guarded this place. One scientist leaned closer, his light catching a faint shimmer. Behind narrow glass windows embedded in the canisters was something extraordinary, a purple liquid, glowing softly as though alive. It pulsed with a strange luminescence, sometimes flickering brighter before dimming again. The team exchanged uneasy glances. For years, conspiracy theorists had spoken of Zerum 525, the so-called fuel of Die Glock, described in whispers as a violet metallic liquid with dangerous properties. They had dismissed it as legend, yet here it was, glowing before their eyes. The silence was broken only by the low hum of machinery. Along the walls stood panels fitted with switches, dials, and gauges frozen at their last readings. Wires coiled into long forgotten cooling systems, the rusted fans still intact. When one panel was brushed with a gloved hand, a faint spark leapt to life, proving that after all these years, some circuits still carried charge. The scientist argued in hushed tones, could this be evidence of Nazi nuclear research? Historical records confirmed that Germany had pursued atomic experiments during the war, though they failed to achieve a functioning bomb. Werner Heisenberg and his colleagues had worked on reactors, but never reached the stage of weaponization. And yet, what stood here seemed more elaborate than those efforts. The cooling vents, vacuum seals, and glowing canisters suggested something beyond a conventional nuclear project. Perhaps it was chemical, perhaps it was something even stranger. The team took careful measurements, keeping their distance. Radiation detectors clicked nervously, though the readings were uneven. The canisters might still hold dangerous material, or something whose properties science had yet to understand. Then, at the far end of the vault, a discovery silenced the room. Resting in the shadows was an object unlike the canisters. It resembled a coffin, massive and metallic, its surface blackened and engraved with strange symbols no one could identify. Unlike the other containers, it carried no warning signs, no words, no labels. It was simply sealed, riveted shut, as though meant never to be opened. For a long moment, no one spoke. The glowing liquid in the canisters was terrifying enough, but this was different. The sarcophagus gave the impression of being more than dangerous. It seemed forbidden. What lay inside this sealed container, hidden even from the SS, promised to be darker than anything they had yet uncovered. The occult connection. The vault's most disturbing secret lay inside the black sarcophagus. With great effort, the bolts were loosened, and the heavy lid was pulled aside. What the team saw left them in silence. Within lay skeletal remains, but these were not arranged like a corpse hastily hidden. The bones were draped in rotting ceremonial robes embroidered with strange symbols, runes woven in silver thread that shimmered even in the dim light. Clutched in the bony fingers were objects that seemed ritualistic. Amulets etched with sigils, a blackened dagger, and a diary bound in cracked leather. The air in the chamber grew heavier as the explorers examined the contents. The diary's pages were brittle, yet the words were still legible. They described rites and experiments that blurred the line between science and mysticism. Phrases like etheric resonance and channeling of ancestral energy appeared alongside diagrams of coils and circuits. These writings hinted at attempts to merge technology with ritual to draw power not only from matter but from something unseen. This discovery matched unsettling evidence from history. In 1935, Heinrich Himmler founded the Ahnenerbe, an SS institute dedicated to researching Germanic heritage, archaeology, and occult traditions. Though it presented itself as a scholarly organization, its activities stretched into pseudoscience and mysticism, with projects ranging from runic studies and dowsing rod research to bizarre theories about hidden energy fields. Himmler himself believed that such knowledge could empower the Reich, and he funded expeditions and secret experiments under the Institute's banner. Among the vault's documents were letters bearing the Ahnenerbe seal. One described investigations into water divination and energy resonance and was signed by an SS overseer. Another spoke of gate experiments, cryptic trials meant to pierce the veil between worlds. The language was vague but haunting, suggesting they had been trying to open portals or communicate beyond normal dimensions. Scattered across a nearby table were manuscripts filled with runes, occult symbols, and calculations written in both German and Latin. Pages described rituals conducted alongside the use of electromagnetic coils, as if the scientists hoped that combining ceremony with machinery would amplify some hidden force. The mixture of sacred geometry, electrical diagrams, and incantations created an unnerving picture of minds trying to bridge mysticism with engineering. Artifacts inside the sarcophagus deepened the unease. Alongside the robes lay a carved obsidian tablet covered in unfamiliar markings. Its edges were scorched, as if exposed to extreme heat. Historians who later examined it debated whether it was an ancient relic or a modern fabrication designed for ritual. Either way, its presence in a Nazi weapons vault was alarming. The discovery confirmed that this was not only a laboratory, but also a temple of sorts, where science and occult belief intertwined. While mainstream archives acknowledged that the Ahnenerbe sponsored pseudoscientific ventures and occult research, much about these experiments remains shrouded in speculation. Yet the objects in this chamber suggested the scientists believed in their work with absolute conviction. If the Nazis had truly intended to continue these occult experiments, then the final chamber, filled with microfilm, blueprints, and sealed artifacts, might reveal not just what they planned, but whether their plans ever reached beyond this vault. Secrets that should never be found. The deeper the researchers pressed into the forgotten vault, the darker the air seemed to grow. At the farthest end of the chamber, beyond the toppled shelves and dust-caked benches, they found something untouched by time: sealed crates bound with red Nazi wax, the eagle and swastika stamps still sharp after nearly 8 decades. These boxes had waited in silence, their secrets guarded by layers of concrete and history itself. When pried open, the crates revealed strange contents, tightly rolled blueprints of machines unlike any known German wartime engineering. Then came the most disturbing find: stacks of medical files, brittle but legible, cataloged the human cost of Nazi science, cross-referenced with post-war records. The papers confirmed that at least 15,754 individuals were used as subjects in experiments across multiple camps. The documents detail starvation trials, exposure to chemical agents, and surgical mutilations performed in the name of progress. Each page is more than evidence. It is a monument to cruelty, a reminder that ambition unchecked by morality leads only to horror. The ethical implications are staggering. In these fragile pages lie ideas that, if rediscovered and misapplied, could inspire new forms of destruction. Some technologies appear far ahead of their time, concepts that even today could be adapted into powerful weapons or dangerous experiments. The archive forces a chilling question: were these plans abandoned because the war ended, or simply because there was never enough time to complete them? At the very end of the vault rests one last crate, its wooden planks reinforced with metal bands, stamped simply with the word Geheim, secret. Unlike the others, it remains unbroken. The team hesitates, knowing that opening it may answer long-held mysteries, but also unleash knowledge better left buried. Some secrets exist not to be uncovered, but to warn us. If this is what was locked away for 79 years, what other relics of Nazi science still lie entombed in silence, and who will dare to open their doors next? Share your thoughts in the comments.